Today, we're doing a 400,000 kilometer review on my 2008 Dodge Dually diesel mega cab. And this is my daily work truck. So we're going to talk about what the truck was used for before I bought it, what I've used it for, and all of the problems and money I've spent on this thing over the years. So let's get into it. Now, the reason I'm doing this video is because I met a lot of young guys on the pipeline who are, 19, 20, and they're just looking at buying their first trucks. And a lot of them really like diesels. And I've had a couple of Duramaxes, I think 3 LBZs. And my whole family drives Dodges. So I thought, before you guys go out and spend a bunch of money on a truck, you guys need to know what it's like owning a diesel and what kind of expenses you can expect to pay, because they're not cheap to keep alive. So I bought this truck from a friend of mine who's a diesel mechanic, heavy duty diesel mechanic. He works on the big stuff. I believe I got it around 2013, and it had 180,000 kilometers on it. And in that time, he had used it for drag racing. It saw the dyno machine. It had a ton of different parts combos on it. It's had 4 different programmers, I think 4 different intake kits on it, 3 different exhaust systems, 3 different transmissions. It saw some hard abuse. It's got all different injectors. It's had, I don't even know how many sets of injectors. I don't know the history on that. And it was a really fun truck to drive. It made a really awesome amount of power for daily driving. And then I bought it and turned it into my daily driver and my work truck. And then in 2015, I started ATP, and this thing became the heart of ATP. It's hauled over 3,000 vehicles. I use this thing to haul scrap metal. It's rescued vehicles during the floods out of the lakes, motorhomes, you name it. This truck's done awesome stuff. It is my absolute favorite truck to drive out of all the vehicles I've ever driven. It has so many awesome features that I find it hard to replace. And I love that style of fender, which was only, 2006 to 2009. The rest of them are a full box side. So yes, this is my favorite work truck review, and I know somebody left a comment, you guys are liking these work truck reviews. So that's why, another reason we're doing this. All right, let's see what I can remember, because I've put a ton of money into this thing. Right now, I'm running a set of Nitto Exo grapplers that are studded. I just had these put on, have about 3,000 kilometers on them, but we have not had any crazy weather so that I can give you guys an honest review on them. I have the support brace up front. I have the dual BDS steering stabilizers, because I was constantly chasing a death wobble in the front end of this thing. Every time I'd hit a bump at 100, 110, it was horrifying. And anytime now that I have 420,000 kilometers on this thing, it actually broke 420,000 today. Anytime the death wobble starts happening, it's a ball joint. It's been a ball joint every time. I've done the ball joints 3 times in this thing. I've done new shocks twice, and I have a brand new set of BDS shocks for it again, ready to go for all the stabilizers front and rear. These lights, the little tabs start to get brittle and break, so the lights rattle. So my bulb's burnt out. So I put an $80 set of bulbs in it. 3 months later, they burned out. I put a $60 set of bulbs in it, and they burnt out in a month. So I swapped these over to LED conversion, which was, I think, 170 bucks. And it's a plug and play kind of system. You just plug them into your existing harness, and they're night and day difference. Spectacular improvement. These little fog lights break all the time when I'm driving down highways. That's the third set of those I've had to put in it. Little details now because I got so many kilometers, like, you know, that fell off. My hubcaps started wearing out, and I lost 2 of them on the highway, and those are $1,000 for the set from Dodge. You can get aftermarket ones for like $550 or something in US. One of the things I notice on these Dodges is the rear leaf springs are a little weak. And I know I've hauled a ton of stuff with this, but I do have airbags in the back, and it sags a bit in the rear end. Every time I put a trailer on this thing, it just drops. Whereas I've driven Duramaxes and Fords, they don't do that at all. So the plan is, now that my airbags have started leaking, I actually have to replace the airbags. And I'm going to have Okanagan Spring build me a new set of springs that are a little more sturdier than, you know, factory. Because this thing hauls 5 different trailers, and now I have to get it ready to haul a 13,000 pound fifth wheel. So that's probably going to cost me, I'm guessing, $1,000 to $1,500 for the leaf springs, and probably, depending on the airbag kit I'm looking at, it's probably just shy of $1,000. I know they make them for $400 or $500, but there's a kit coming out for these older trucks that's hitting the market this month. And I'll tell you about it when I get it. These are Performance World LED lights. They are $300 each. And I'm just starting to have a problem because the wiring harness runs up under the hood and it's starting to corrode. So when the relay, which is just under there, starts to get wet, it actually connects and half of my fog lights turn on even while they're off. Oh, wiper motor. I've replaced the wiper motor under here. I want to say it was between 130 and 160 bucks, but I went with an aftermarket one, and I wish I didn't. I wish I would have went with the OEM one, because sometimes I'll turn the wipers on and then I'll turn them off and they continue to go 5 or 6 times. They're very weird and intermittent. I'm just going to bounce around and try and remember everything I've done to this thing. My seat starting to sack out, losing all the foam. You can buy the new foam replacement off of Amazon. Last time I looked, it was 130 bucks if they have it in stock. They don't always have it in stock. But my towel, I just put it on the left side, and that's how I even myself out. So this is an H&S Minimax that has a bunch of custom maps built into it. We have an AFE stage 2 intake. We have an AFE race exhaust 4-inch on this thing. I wanted the 4-inch because I didn't want it too loud. Reason it's had 3 exhaust systems is because when you get to the bend over the rear axle, they rot out there. This was a Vancouver truck, so it saw a lot of rain. Once I went to the AFE, don't have any more issues. Now this Minimax is starting to freeze on me after all these years. And apparently there should have been a chip come with it so I can do updates. I've never done an update since 180,000. And we have 420,012 kilometers on this thing. Another thing I've had to replace was my heat stopped working. I couldn't figure out what the problem was. And it turns out that this is all connected to your ignition. And I actually had to buy a whole new ignition switch and actually install it. I cannot remember if we had to get it programmed or not. But in order to get heat, I had to put a new ignition switch in this thing. I'm on my 3rd set of batteries. They're about $300 each. What else can I tell you about this thing? I guess we'll talk about under the hood. And it's getting really cold right now. I just got to turn some heat on. Because I got heat now. Under the hood, we have stage 2 injectors, 60 horse injectors. I've had to do head gasket and head studs. That was $3,500 from Okanagan Diesel, and that was before the pandemic. I don't know what they're charging now. What I do like about this thing is, let me just pop the hood. Is I can work on this thing myself. Whereas my Duramax, if I wanted to do a water pump, they wanted $3,500 to do it. If I wanted to do injectors, they wanted $3,500 or $4,000 to do it. But if I remove this intake, I have access to my water pump and my alternator, and I can change it on the side of the road, which I've done. I've had to replace my battery connectors on the side of the road, so I have cheap ones on right now because my battery cables are corroding really badly after all these years. So I actually need to do all new cables, which is a big pain in the butt. So I've been avoiding that, but we'll get to that point soon. It's deleted. It's got your basic bolt-on accessories. Those little lights up top are intermittent. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. Oh yes. This is what you get. Oh yeah, tail light. I actually have to replace the pigtail on the harness to get that light to work. Because the bulb, you can push it in and it works, but it's just not quite connecting right. Brakes. Yes, brakes. I've done front brake pads since 180,000. I've never had to do rotors. I did do new rotors, calipers, and pads on the back because I ran them down to metal, and that was $1,000. And then 2 years later, I had to do calipers again because they started leaking the seals because I used some kind of offshore caliper that my parts store supplied me with. What else can I tell you? Oh yeah, I smoked my mirror on a telephone pole backing down an alley somehow. Transmission. This thing has had 3 transmissions in it. Reason being is the first 2, supposedly, this is what I was told. We had Diablo tuner in this thing, and the tuner messed up and caused issues with the shifting, and it burnt the transmission out. Transmission shop didn't believe us. It was actually the performance shop that did it all. It wasn't a transmission shop. And so they put another transmission in it, and it burnt that one out in a day. So they changed brands over to H&S Minimax, and has not been an issue. And I do not know if you can buy the Minimaxes anymore. I heard a whole bunch of legal issues for those guys. I have a $1,000 Pioneer navigation unit, and it's now giving me grief because it started just randomly picking whether you want to be on CD, do you want Sirius. It'll just start randomly going through them all every 30 seconds. So that's now giving me grief. The lights behind here have gotten intermittent. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. My air conditioning quit working. I spent $2,300 getting everything under the hood replaced, new condenser, new compressor, and it turns out that there's a evaporator under the dash that you're supposed to also replace. So my air conditioning worked for a week and a half, and then it quit working. So I don't know if I got a rock in the condenser and it leaked out the coolant at the Freon, or do I need the evaporator. My heated seats have stopped working. I can turn it on, it'll usually start flashing, and it never turns on. That could be because my seat's sacked out. Maybe the wires are frayed or something. My rear door lock here has quit working. on the buttons. When I go to lock my truck, I have to manually make sure that door locks. So I'm just starting to experience all the little tiny stuff failing. Once I start driving, if I get into it, I'll get See Dealer Now and Service Truck, all those pop-ups, because it's trying to take readings from sensors that aren't there anymore from being deleted. Transmission, this has the race transmission with the AFE converter in it. I think it's a triple disc converter, something along those lines. And it's had zero issues from the time they replaced it at 180,000 to now. I've had the oil changed once, and they said it was clean, didn't even need to be changed, but I said change it anyway. I am still running the factory U-joints in this thing. I've never replaced the U-joints in this truck. I just spray them with fluid film every time I get back home. Every couple of months, I spray them with fluid film, and that stuff sizzles and gets in there. I've never replaced them because the factory ones don't have grease fittings. So that was my theory of how to keep them alive. So watch my signal. There you go. Now it's all of a sudden disconnected. So I actually have to replace the pigtail on that. As a daily driver, it is just spectacular. I love driving this thing. I get on the highway using summer fuel, I get around 1,100 kilometers to a tank. But once they change to winter diesel, everything changes. Like right now around town, I'm getting probably 600 kilometers to a tank. And I just filled it up today. It was $200 to fill it. Diesel's pretty expensive right now. So for you young guys looking at diesels, you gotta understand that when they have a breakdown, it's expensive. But for my shop, I have to have the diesel because I pull so many big heavy trailers. And this one also, I can actually rest my elbows on the door and the console and still hold the steering wheel, unlike that Ford I was driving the other week. So right now you can hear, I'll turn these off, you can hear a little bit of the exhaust, but other than that, it's really quiet in here. I've run so many different sets of tires on this thing, I can't remember. I think 3 sets of 35s. I've run 285s, 265s, 235s. I've run studded winters, just winters without studs. I've run mud and snow. I really like the Dick CPEC Extreme Countries, but they're not great for hauling trailers and doing what I do now. I'm all highway driving. They were fun when I was rescuing cars, pulling stuff out of the bush and the mud. They were spectacular for that. But now I'm running highways all the time. Like when I go up north, I want studded, awesome tires on this thing. I don't want to have any issues. And when you're buying parts for these things, don't cheap out and get the cheap parts. Get the stuff that's lifetime warranty. Just make your life better. Alright. Just gotta lock the shop, and then we'll head down the highway with this thing. There's a little button right here so you can manually shift gears up and down because it has a 6-speed in it. And that button has stopped working. So I can't manually shift anymore. So you have to replace the entire shifter, and I checked a couple of years ago. It was $222 from Dodge. They didn't have it in stock. It was a special order item. It's probably gone up by now. So I just put the tow haul button on and it downshifts for me. And I always leave my engine brake on. That's why I haven't replaced the front brake pads very much. But I do have to replace that shifter at some point. Now I had another issue with this truck. It was surging. You could literally watch the speedometer just fluctuating. Didn't matter how fast you're going, what speed, if you were idling, if you were driving. And you would actually notice it in the headlights. They would be dimming as it was surging. Could not figure out what was wrong, and I was concerned about it. But I got used to it, ended up driving my truck for months like that, because nobody couldn't find an answer to this online. And I ended up taking my truck in to a friend's shop for an alignment. And he did me a favor and left my truck on the hoist all day with the key on while he was working on another job, and completely killed the batteries. And I don't know what happened, but it needed new batteries, needed new alternator. I suspect that they tried to jump start it and cross the cables, but I never got an actual definite answer out of that. So both batteries and the alternator needed to be replaced. And then for the next week, they spent trying to figure out why my truck wouldn't charge anymore. And so my truck had to go to another shop with a great big computer where they could reflash the computer, and they actually had to get the truck to, I guess, relearn how to charge and talk to the alternator, something along those lines. I don't do the computer stuff myself, but an alignment turned into $2,300 in damage to my truck, but reflashing the computer eliminated the surge. And after that, I was told from Performance Diesel Shop that said when you keep changing your settings on your programmer from, you know, performance to tow and everything, you get what's called a dirty programmer, and all the maps start stacking on top of each other, and it literally needed a reflash to be clean. And it solved my surging issue. Never had it again. So while that sucked to go through, I didn't have my truck for a week and a half, I was happy to figure out the surging. And so now I only take my truck to my friend Doug. He's the only one that's allowed to touch my truck. Now, because my headlight tabs are broken, my driver's side headlight sits a little high. So on the highway, a lot of cars high beam me, thinking I got my high beams on with these LEDs. I'll wait till we're on the highway to do any more filming. It's a little bright right now. So for you young guys that are thinking about buying diesels, call around to local shops and just ask them on what things cost. Yeah, there's lots of fun in doing that, but if the truck's not built, like if you see a programmer in a truck you're buying, you want to make sure that thing has a set of ARP head studs in it. So call around to the shops and see what it costs to do head gaskets. You know, on a Dodge diesel, we got an inline 6, so there's only one head gasket, and that's $3,500. But Duramax and Ford, well, they're a V8, so you got two heads to consider. I know they don't blow them both at the same time, but definitely price those things out before you look into buying a certain vehicle that you found used. A friend of mine has a 2011 Dodge dually mega cab diesel like mine. He had to have the transmission done last year. One shop quoted him $11,000 with all billet shafts. The other shop did it for $4,800 with all billet shafts. You're going to get different prices everywhere you call. You're going to get guys that don't want the job, so they're going to overprice it. And you're going to get guys that do want the job. But just because they want the job, are they qualified? Can they get it done properly? Or are you going to be taking your truck back there repeatedly to solve issues? So those are LED conversion headlights that just replace your factory bulbs. I am so happy I changed to those. I've done 3 alternators and 2 water pumps on this thing. I think alternators were around the $400 mark, if I remember correctly. Water pumps, I'm guessing probably 150-ish, but I can't quite remember. But they're not difficult to do on this thing. Like, you can literally do it in your driveway, just with your basic toolkit. I've done one tensioner in 420,000 kilometers on the belt tensioner. Engine brake is mandatory to me now. If it doesn't have an engine brake, I will not drive it for work truck, like for my own business. It just saves you a fortune in brakes. It makes driving a lot easier. There you go. That's the engine brake kicking in. It just slows you right down. I like this tuner. It actually tells you when the torque converter is engaged and when it's not. And of course, like any tuner, you can mess with all the settings in your truck. You don't have to have daytime running lights on. The little door chime, you know, you can turn off your seat belts, all that kind of stuff. You can mess with that stuff. You can adjust your speedometer according to tire sizes, which I forget to do a lot every time because I change my tires a lot. Probably about 3 times a year. I ran 35-inch tires when I drove to California in this thing, and at 85 miles an hour, I set the cruise control down the I-5 and was getting 900 kilometers to a tank. That's on summer fuel. Winter fuel, I don't change the settings on the programmer ever. I leave it on the tow setting. You can actually hear pinging when I'm running winter fuel. I changed it once to the performance setting and the truck was creaking and growling. It did not sound happy. I've had to replace the front driver's side axle joint because it was winter time, there was snow everywhere, and I came drifting into a parking lot in 4-wheel drive, and there was one dry spot in the middle of the parking lot right where the drain was. And while it was spinning, that front driver's side tire caught that dry spot, and all of a sudden my axle joint was knocking. So axle joints suck to do on this thing. That's why I spray them with fluid film. I've had 0 issues since then. And normally when I'm doing reviews on work trucks, I'm a little hesitant to get into it because I don't know the history of the trucks. I'm worried something's gonna break. But I know this truck. I'm not worried about this one at all. It rocks. It's really fun to drive this thing. Like, it pulls so hard. My brother has a 2018 Ram, and it's not even close to what this thing is. So there you go. That's your 400,000 kilometer review. 420 actually. Just thought I'd keep the work truck reviews going. And I'm actually home right now, so I got some cool stuff going on in the shop you guys are going to be finding out in the next week. I can't tell you today.